As of 40 minutes ago, it is Friday, May 22nd, 2026. It's been a while since I've done one of these, but I figured what better time than now to do another one. You're in the heat of the NHL playoffs, the NBA playoffs, the mid morning of a horror genre renaissance right now that has almost lived up to the hype. I would say it still depends on the summer and fall. There were some flops out of the gate that a lot of people were pretty excited about. A lot of people, synonymous for me, um, just quite a few that missed the mark but were close. Granted, some of which I feel are just not ever going to happen, at least not that rendition of it. But I feel like the groundwork was laid for another attempt in other ways. I would say the best example of the former would be Psycho Killer. The storyline just fell flat. Character was there, the idea was there. It's kind of a tried and true premise, but it just one of those that I guess makes a better trailer than it does feature length film. Best example of the latter has to be Undertone, which, as I mentioned one of the previous shows, it has a great premise. It takes something that caught an entire generation off guard and scared them senseless, and it cranked it up to a 10. But again, the storyline just wasn't quite there, though I feel like another attempt at it could net some positive results. As I mentioned when this trailer came out, White Noise was the, I guess, precursor to this in the way of only real attempt at auditory horror. And it wasn't really a horror movie. Going back and watching it now, if you see the trailer, you understand why. Because it's absolutely dressed up as, the next Poltergeist, the next Amityville Horror, the whole nine yards. But watching the film, it was like, this just feels like someone doing the trailer from memory and just making it up. It was very different, which was fine. It was a great thriller, put it that way. Michael Keaton, so you can't go wrong, but very different from what you would have expected going in had you watched the trailer. And I remember that trailer, no matter what genre of film you went to at the time, that trailer was inescapable for about 3 months. And it was jarring at first because it was such a new avenue. As I've said before, the 90s, you saw a lot of, I guess, remnants of the satanic panic of the late 80s and early 90s that bled, in some cases, into the early 2000s. But much of the visuals had kind of run its course. I think when morning talk shows were trying to claim that Elmo was satanic, that's where they lost the plot. But it saw a bit of a resurrection when they introduced reversed audio. And that became a hyper obsession there for a while, where it was, play every song you've ever heard in existence backwards and see if you can find a hidden message in there. And some of them, there absolutely were. Others, it's a bit of a stretch. But then they meshed that with the paranormal, and you got the film White Noise. Only, again, it just was very different from what was pitched. Though Undertone, I would say it also made a much better trailer than actual film, but the premise was there. It's not the first time I've made a prediction of that nature either. Not not claiming to be Nostradamus, but I remember watching the original Mad Max in high school. And this would have been 30 years roughly after it came out. And all I could think was an updated version of this with even C minus acting. And you've got the action adventure movie of the decade. And lo and behold, came out in 2015 with the newer one. And it was every bit as great as you'd imagine it would be. Because that one, it was just a budgeting issue. They used a lot of the same members of production and same director, but he was working on a shoestring budget with Mel Gibson in the original, and then he got big time funding for this newer one, and he made it count. It wasn't over the top with the CGI, but it was enough to where you're like, okay, this has got a lot going on, and everything looked believable, and it looked crisp, and it was shot in its own palette. It's very different from any other film I've seen in the way that it looks on the screen. The soundtrack was every bit as gripping as the action sequences themselves. So I could see something like this with a film like Undertone and, auditory horror. I feel like it's one of the unexplored subgenres right now. Like the last 2 years, there was a hyper obsession with body horror. And I think that's probably kind of run its course because there's just only so many things you can do with that without it getting really silly. But this, you could do quite a bit with. You don't want to beat it into the ground, and you don't want to be tripping over each other, re-releasing the same knockoff film every, 9 months. But there's juice to be squeezed here. That being said, not everything has come up a little short so far, and it feels like everything is trending in the right direction, generally speaking, in the way of highly anticipated horror films this year. Namely, starting with Hokum. That one, it got great reviews. It's got a pretty reliable cast in it. I'm a big Adam Scott fan, and I always find it interesting when he ventures off into a new genre because he just makes it look natural. It's really impressive. I'm excited to watch that one. I haven't gotten around to it yet, though it feels like it is being overshadowed currently by Obsession. I keep hearing great things about that one, which again is really encouraging. And I think a lot of people are excited for the end of the month with Backrooms. End of the month being next week, really. I believe it premieres a week from yesterday. So that one should be interesting. It's exciting to see a director not even of legal drinking age in the US being given a shot by a major production company and basically taking the Ari Aster route and taking a concept he had as a short film that became a series and making a feature-length film out of it. And I have seen the Backrooms series. I've seen a lot of the spin-offs. I enjoy all of them. I think it's just different, and yet it taps into something that's familiar with a lot of people. In fact, the majority of people when they see it. Depending on the setting, they see something that they recognize, which is odd because some of the settings, just the decor and the layout are so dated, like dated to the point where they shouldn't look familiar for people born after a certain point, yet somehow they still look recognizable to people born long after that point. So, really excited to see that. And I think stuff like that and some of these unheard of, unheralded actors and actresses being given a shot by some of these major production companies could be the resurrection of commercial film as we know it. People are starving for different. And some of these faces, that's how a lot of them stay fresh, and that's how a lot of them just kind of go rotten. Is you just feel like you're being sold the same product over and over and over, and you can't really fault the actor because it's one of those where it's like, you know, they found something that pays the bills, and they're just going to keep going to the well until the well runs dry. Though I've always respected actors for stepping out of their comfort zone, even if it doesn't quite garner the success they might have hoped in terms of, feedback or ticket sales, whatever the box office does. I've always respected that because I think it takes a lot of courage. And a lot of times when you're at that point and you get a role for something that's way out of your wheelhouse, you're taking a leap of faith because you more likely than not got the attention because you did really well in something. So, it'd be like, I don't know, in some respects, it'd be like someone who's really good at basketball being told, you know what, baseball just fits you better. And I think Michael Jordan and Deion Sanders, guys like that, they could attest to the fact that, sometimes the idea is great, but wow, does it get tough when you jump from one sport to the next. I think Bo Jackson's really the only one who's ever been able to do it at the professional level and be that good at two different sports. The, I guess, requirements or the prerequisites for being a convincing actor in different genres vary, and it's tough to find overlap between some genres, but some are just able to do it and they're able to make it all look so effortless and natural that you couldn't tell the difference if you didn't know any better. Maybe that is their, best or most comfortable genre to be in. So I'm always excited about that. But I think, yeah, these younger directors, actors, actresses, producers getting a shot by companies like A24 is massive. And that's why I'm shamelessly a huge A24 fan. They put out a lot of stuff. It's not for everybody, and it's very different. That's what I like about it. Every A24 film you run into is just, it's different from one to the next. And I don't know, I'll always give them a shot because of that, because I know, like, they did something that a lot of other companies right now just don't have the guts to do, to take that leap. You're like, yeah, this director's 19 or 20 in the case of Backrooms, but he had an idea and it caught the internet by storm, and he's got, the storyline and the arc of a feature-length film put together here. He just needs the backing to do it. Let's give it a shot. I think that's much more commendable than, I don't know, Marvel Universe 85. It's just like, what are we doing here? Kind of lost the plot after the fourth or fifth one. So I'm excited to see how the rest of the year plays out, but I know if Backrooms does well, and not even, box office wise, but if it's a hit amongst viewers, this could be looked at as like a tipping point almost, which sounds dramatic and over the top, but it just feels like it's been a while since we've seen a genre just get swept in a completely different direction in a span of about a month or 6 weeks, really. In at least, you'd have to go back a ways. Where it's like, okay, this month of this year was paramount to the commercial success and the Mount Rushmore for the audience of that genre, the way May of 2026 looks to be and has been so far. We cross our fingers that the rest of it goes this way too. So that'll be fun. That being said, speaking of acting, the NBA Western Conference Finals has been nothing short of must-see TV. Again, I will never be confused with Nostradamus, but I did say in December the Spurs and Thunder would make for a really fun playoff series, and you can call my bias, but I noticed I don't follow many basketball-centric accounts on social media, but so far through the first two games, when those games start for the next 5 or so hours, the talk of those games have dominated my social media feeds, and understandably so. It's been 10 years. You have to go back to at least LeBron's Cavs and Curry's Warriors back and forth to find this level of, truth be told, what it is emotional investment from each side. You watch a lot of games in a lot of different sports, and a lot of the time it just kind of feels like the players on the playing surface could care less who wins or loses. Like they just kind of feel like, you know what? As long as I don't get hurt and my check clears, I'm good. But this, you very much get the feel like the 15 guys on each side could play for free. Just the satisfaction of beating the other side is more than enough compensation for them, which I don't care what sports you're into. Sports are at their best when the two sides cannot stand each other. And you notice it too, even slight things, little things. If you're a behavioral science type, when you watch the post-game interviews, you're so used to over the last 20 years hearing nothing but, wow, they got a great group over there. There are a lot of good guys. They play really hard. We just found a way to win today. That's kind of the canned response that you hear over and over. But with these two teams, they cannot be beaten into a nice thing to say about the other side, which is exactly how you want it. I am very much in the school of George Carlin. I don't want to see post-game handshakes. I don't want to see them chumming it up. I get they're human. I don't care if they're hanging out, away from the game. But during that time, the laughs, the smiles, the pleasantries exchanged, I'm not a fan. So I could not love this more. The Eastern Conference has been pretty entertaining. You watched a 20-point lead slip away 2 nights ago. So that was entertaining, but I don't even think it's in the same league right now as the animosity that radiates from the screen showing Oklahoma City and San Antonio. And I think the best part of it for anybody who even finds basketball mildly amusing is this could very well be a playoff matchup for the next decade straight, and I don't think it would be a surprise to anyone. I imagine barring one or both sides getting absolutely run over with injuries, they're going to be in the playoffs every year, and They're both just playing at a different level from the other 13 teams in the conference. There are only really two or three that could give either side a run. So I'd say these two teams are going to be facing each other quite a bit, which after 2 games in 3 nights, it's exciting considering they already look like they could just go at it at any minute. So that's been a treat. As for baseball, they've been overrun with this epidemic of inside the park home runs this week. I've been watching baseball 26 years. I don't think I've seen this many inside the park home runs in the first 25 years combined as I have this year, and especially this week. I think there were 4 in the last 3 days. If you want to laugh, just basically turn on any baseball highlights right now. At some point during the game, there was inside the park home run. There was somebody slipping and falling, somebody getting into a heated exchange with a fan. It's got plenty of entertainment away from the balls and strikes. I don't know if I'm a prisoner of the present or if this year has just been above and beyond in the terms of the abnormal, but I just know I've never seen this many inside the park home runs in this short of a stretch. And there's just no easy way for those to happen. So it's chaos every time you see one. So those have been entertaining. And weather-wise, we've officially reached the time of year where the people who live in warm states start to resent the people who live in cooler states for celebrating that summer's here because, well, summer is just one of those fluid definitions. It's one of those words that's just got a fluid definition. It depends on where you live. You know, in some places it means living in a swamp for the next 3 months where you can't go get the mail without sweating. Others it means a balmy 78 and sunny. So it's always fun to watch those two philosophies clash online. But as for my random thought for the night, I've noticed in my feed it's a lot of nostalgic stuff on every social media app right now, namely video games, which is understandable because anyone who grew up circa 1985 to 2005, you just figured if you made it to 2020, it would be unfathomable how much they've advanced. And in some respects they have. Others, they've kind of hit a wall. And it feels like the motives for making them have been kind of tainted or jaded over the years. And also, the monopolization of a lot of things has led to just a dramatic decrease in the user experience. Like video games, you saw a lot of franchises in the late 2000s to early 2010s. They got monopolized. Like football belonged exclusively to EA. Basketball belonged exclusively to 2K. Hockey belonged exclusively to EA. But then you go back and watch, and it's never the game. It's never the last game that the quote unquote losing side puts out. But if you go to the one the year before that, it's always like, wow, this was really good. Like, NBA Live before it died was awful, but there were a couple years in there where it was incredible. Same thing with, obviously the common examples, NFL 2K. But then you go to other industries and you look and you're like, yeah, there's a fat chance if this isn't as good as it was, there's no competition. It's just been monopolized. It's just how even subpar competition breeds better products overall for the people. If you have entity A and there are 2 or 3 competing companies for the top spot, even if there is a clear pecking order, It's amazing how much better the best one is when there are entities right behind it versus when it's just got free reign of that entire, industry, whatever it might be. That being said, what's your random thought of the day?